I'm Caroline Kealey. I'm Director of Meat Science for JSR Genetics, and I specialise in supply chain optimisation, bearing in mind that we produce pork for the consumer. So I'll be discussing Boar Taint, the basics of what Boar Taint is, and then some of the management opportunities that we have going from genetics all the way through to nutrition and production system to help reduce Boar Taint, or at least manage Boar Taints within our supply chains. I talk about the global market and the effect that importing meat from abroad might be having on our Boar Taint incidence within the UK, and also our prospects for external exporting of product, specifically with the Asian markets where we know that they're more susceptible to detecting Boar Taint. Hopefully there'll be some really simple tips that they'll be able to take away and implement straight away to help reduce Boar Taint within supply chains, but also just to give a better understanding of how the consumer perceives Boar Taint and some of the effects that we might be having within the supply chain as a result of the Boar Taint risk. As part of this talk, I have some little sample pots for you to smell. We've got androstenone and skatol, just in case you've never really smelt them. You don't need to take the pots out of the containers, but do feel free to pass them around. The one with the G on the top is skatol. So I'm Caroline Kealey, Director of Meat Science at JSR Genetics, and I'm a meat scientist. I'm not a geneticist, I'm not a nutritionist, I'm not a housing environment advisor, but I'm going to go at this as a bit of a brief overview and try not to go into too much detail. So it's a how-to guide to reduce Boar Taint, future management strategies, and the role of technology. So it's a whistle-stop tour of a long-term problem. We're going to look at what Boar Taint is, why is Boar Taint a problem, have a brief overview of the global perspective, controlling Boar Taint, and then technology and long-term strategies. So the definition, according to scientific literature, is it's an odour or flavour offensive to some people, which can be evident during the cooking or eating of pork or pork products, resulting from high concentrations of skatol and/or androstenone. Some people also add indole into that, but that is the definition that we're going to currently use. So basically, it's compounds that are found in meats and fat that affect the purchase decision. It's not something that you can see or detect prior to purchase, but it is something that will certainly affect the repeat purchase decision. So what is Boar Taint? Well, we're going to talk about skatol, talk about androstenone. Skatol is important because it's both fat and water soluble. So not only do you find it in fat, you will also find it in lean tissue. And it's a microbial fermentation byproduct. It happens in boars, gilts, and castrates, and it's to do with microbial fermentation in the hind gut. So you can manage it through feed, but skatol, you'll smell it, but it smells a bit like mothballs, but in very, very low levels. It's actually used in perfume because it smells quite floral. I personally can't see how that sample can smell remotely floral, but apparently that's what it is used for. Androstenone is only fat soluble, so you'll only find that in fat, and therefore when you have high levels of back fat or high levels of fat within a tissue, you could end up with Boar Taint being contained within that. It's a sex pheromone. It's only found in boars because it's a sex pheromone, and it increases with puberty. So diagrammatically, you've got a boar, and you've got androstenone and skatol that are being synthesised and accumulating in the tissues. So you have a boar about 2 to 4 weeks after birth, and there is a little bit of a boost in androstenone due to the hormones that are circulating in the system at that time, and then you'll have another boost as that pig approaches and goes past puberty. So androstenone is produced in the testes, it's transported to the salivary glands, and it is there to stimulate the sow. So when you see a boar getting all slathered at the mouth, he's producing androstenone. It's to make the sow stand so that she can be served. Skatol is purely a fermentation to the hindgut byproduct. It's not got any physiological benefit to the pig, and in fact, if you have androstenone and skatol in conjunction, you will end up with one inhibiting the breakdown of the other. So if you have androstenone above 0.15 micrograms per gram, you will end up with an increased perception of Boar Taint. So is Boar Taint a problem? Well, as you can probably smell from the pot, it's not the most pleasant of product. And we are talking about pork bearing in mind the consumer. You know, we produce pork for the consumer, we're not producing it for our own good. And if we have a product that's not acceptable to the consumer, then we have a problem. When it comes to repeat purchase decisions, you have the acceptability of that product, and that will basically determine whether they go back and buy another pack of meat. So your texture is the most important, followed by juiciness, followed by flavour. However, if you have a particularly abnormal or offensive flavour, it will overrule everything that's come before. So you can have the best texture, the most juiciness product, and if it's got a horrible flavour, then you can pretty much guarantee that was not an acceptable product. This is some work that was done by Darryl D'Souza and his team over in Australia, and this was looking at boar taint incidents in pigs at age of slaughter. So you can see in the little red box, anything contained outside of that is not acceptable to the consumer, the Western consumer, we will say. So when you're talking about a Western consumer, you're looking at about 0.5 to 1 micrograms per gram of androstenone and 0.2 to 0.25 of skatol. And anything inside that red box was acceptable, but everything outside wasn't. That's 25% of boars that went to slaughter that were not acceptable to the consumer. And bearing in mind that you have about 45.7% of consumers who are mediumly sensitive to skatol and boar taint androstenone, and 25% of consumers who are very sensitive to boar taint. If you've got 25% of pigs that are going to slaughter, they have boar taint, you can say 12% of the product on the shelf, taking into fact boars and gilts, is going to have a level of boar taint. You've got potentially 50% of your audience that are going to find a level of offence, even if it doesn't affect their repeat purchase. It's all very well and good. I'm talking about Australia here, and we regularly see articles come up and say, don't worry, we don't need to worry about boar taint. We don't have it in the UK because of our slaughter weights. Well, unfortunately, we probably do, and I know that AHDB have been doing some work on this, and this is basically demonstrating that as carcass weight increases, the correlation with androstenone and the correlation with skatol is actually very low. It's not weight that's important, it's the age, the sexual maturity of that animal. Now, obviously, weight and age do have a correlation, but it's the age that's a key point here, not the weight. And, yep, we definitely have a risk of boar taint within the UK. This is some work that was carried out with the University of Guelph over 4 years. I did this when I very, very first started back with JSR nearly 11 years ago. And this was animals that were blood tested the day of slaughter. We checked them to make sure they were sexually mature. And of those animals that we tested, 27%, even including the ones that weren't sexually mature, did demonstrate boar taint. So this is a real-life situation. These were pigs that were sent to commercial slaughter within the UK, and if they were picked up by a consumer, 27% of those animals would have had a boar taint that was detectable. So incidence of boar taint is independent of carcass weight. Why is boar taint a problem? Well, we're producing pork for a consumer. We know that they like texture, juiciness and flavour, and we have a consumer who will only ever have about 25% of protein included in their diet. Peter Knapp at Pig Breeders Round Table a couple of weeks ago had a very, very good talk about consumers and their intake of protein within their diet, and he demonstrated that as countries develop, they will increase their protein intake, and then as they've reached 25%, rather than increasing further, they will then switch out and go for a more premium product or a more ethical product. So we've only got 25% of protein intake available to us within the consumer market. We need to be able to have a product that is acceptable to the consumer and take them away from our competitor products such as chicken, beef and lamb, because we've only got 25% of that daily intake. We need to make sure that pork actually features. So we need to understand why there might be a problem and why people aren't buying it. So we've got a global market. I don't know if you've all picked up the little pocketbook. Some of these figures aren't quite accurate because I submitted this a month before the book was published. But basically using DEFRA facts and forecasted figures that were available, you can see that in 2016 the UK killed about 10.5 million pigs. It produced 900,000 tonnes of product, And we actually used nearly double that, not quite double, but 1.6 million tonnes we used in the UK. So we're exporting some, we're importing more. Why is that a problem? Well, imported meat, we get quite a lot of our product from the Danish. They import, or we import, about 169,000 tonnes. And that can be broken down into processed hams and shoulders, bacon and hams, offal, sausages, as well as your fresh meat. Processed hams and shoulders could be a problem because we know that by curing, it actually magnifies the perception of androstenone and scatol. So if you have a boar-tainted product that has been cured, it will actually enhance that negative flavour profile and will be unacceptable to the consumer. But the main thing is the fact that they have online detection. They use the human nose score, and they are working towards the 2018 EU castration ban. So they're looking at pigs, detecting if they have boar taint, and then those products that have boar taint are being streamed within the factory. This is Dan Jorgensen. He's been Ag Manager, or Agricultural Ministry of Fisheries and Farms, since 2013, I think. And he went to press saying that, don't worry, they're not worried about the EU castration ban because they're going to send it all to Britain and Germany because we're more than willing to accept it. So we have a slight problem insofar as the boar taint incidence, whilst we know that we've got about 27% of commercial progeny that have boar taint, we'll probably actually have more than that proportionally on the supermarket shelf because of dumping onto the UK market by people that we import from. So, main aim, control of boar taint. Well, there's no single solution, unfortunately. There are significant effects that you can have by one quick means. However, it's not always economically advantageous. But there's also marginal effects due to different measures. So I think I'm going to discuss today more of the multi-pronged approach. And we'll go from that scatol, because it is a product of fermentation in the hindgut, is more of a management on farm. So we can talk about diet, feed, housing. Androstenone, because it's a sex pheromone, it's not only tied to production on farm. Obviously we want to be efficient and get the pigs off the unit as young as possible, but there are also some genetic measures that we can make to improve androstenone levels. So I'm sure you've all read, pause on the way. This was produced by Wageningen University. It's basically a compilation of studies that they've done over many years. It's 5 years of research in preparation for 2018, and they're looking at everything that they could possibly do to try and reduce boar taint. The main factors that they've got is housing systems. So they've come up and said that if you have less than 10 boars per pen, you're going to have less boar taint. They've also said if you have less than 30 pigs per pen, you're going to have less boar taint. Housing that's less than 5 years has less boar taint. They've also said, and this is the interesting thing, that slat gaps of over 18 millimetres has less boar taint. Now, obviously, that's in contravention of our current legislation that is aiming for 18 millimetres. So, there's definitely a balance between welfare of the animal and trying to reduce boar taint, but there are certain things that we've had to do that may have actually been negatively affecting the boar taint levels within the pig. And they've also said that pen surface per boar of less than 1.0 metres squared. So yet again, it's looking at welfare versus boar taint balance. We can't do everything, but there is definitely science being done. We then have control of boar taint through hygiene, so pen housing. Scatol, like I said, it's fat and water soluble. It can be absorbed through the skin. So if you have a dirty pig laying in a straw yard, that could be, if there's excrement within that straw, that could be causing absorption of scatol through the skin, which is obviously not going to be very beneficial. So it's all talking about management of buildings, making sure that you are continuously cleaning. It's all basically just management that we would be doing anyway, but making sure that when you have animals in an area that's starting to get quite dunged up, look at your ventilation system. Is there something going on that's causing the animals to all defecate in one area, causing it to be bunged up? Are they all laying in one area because of the ventilation? So it's a whole chain approach. There's no one simple answer, and we all have to work together. Feed. Okay, so we've got feed, pellets versus meal. Pellets apparently increase scatol. Now, like I said, I'm not a nutritionist. I'm sure they'll be more than willing to talk to you about the microgut and how different feed product types alter the gut microflora and how everything is processed within the hindgut. But, you know, is there something that we should be doing with regard to looking at pellets versus meal? Increased fibre. We're looking for easily fermented fibre, such as sugar beet pulp. You can also use chicory because it has inulin in it. And there is also some science being done looking at the barley to wheat ratio. So if you reduce barley or increase barley, because barley has more fibre content than wheat. So the research that was done was looking at barley content, and they basically turned around and said if you increase your barley levels, you will have reduced scatol. Now, the research that I've seen hasn't put an exact figure on it, but that's just the work that I've been looking at on a meat science point of view. And when we're looking at things like feed, we've also got... Okay, it's just going to die on me there. So reducing the crude protein content from about 15% to 13.3% has a very significant effect on the level of scatol. If you increase the fermentable non-starch from about 9.65 to about 13.75%, and then if you added 10% of sugar beet pulp and 3% chicory, we've seen very significant reductions in scatol. And because scatol and androstenone are quite closely related with regards to breakdown in the liver, if you affect one, you can affect the other. So it's all about managing the level of scatol so you don't get the elevated levels of androstenone. There's also some research been looking at using, and I'm going to probably pronounce this wrong, but it's sepiolite, which is a clay-like mineral, and if that's added at 0.5%, that has been seen to also reduce scatol levels. And the BPEX work was the one that looked at pellets versus meal. So there is work out there on the AHDB website. It's joined us. So yes, protein, excessive protein increases scatol, and phase feeding. So I've said about reducing the crude protein content from about 15% to 13.3%. If you have animals that are being overfed, then you have an argument for split sex feeding. You know, we've just said that boar taint is absorbed through the skin in the form of scatol. If you have your boars and your gilts penned separately as part of your housing, you would then also be able to do phase feeding, so you're not oversupplying the protein. So it's all management things that you will be looking at, but there are definite benefits with regards to meat quality as well. So nothing that we're suggesting would be a detriment to your production efficiencies. It's purely just bearing in mind everything that you do has a knock-on effect on meat quality. Control of boar taint, well, elimination. Quite a lot of countries are still castrating using surgical castration. That's obviously not something that we currently do. And there is vaccines out there. So there's Improvac, there is another product coming out on the market by Seva, and we have several people in the audience who'll be more than willing to talk to you about products that are currently available on the market. But you know, there are a lot of countries out there that are using Improvac, and there have been some very, very good results. Now, we are obviously aware that there is consumer perception issues with these products, but it's certainly something that we might need to look at for the future, because we are going to be overtaken by the global market, especially when it comes to being imported and exported. If we're exporting to the Asian market, China, etc., you know, they're our third biggest export market, even if you discount the offal. The Asians are far more susceptible to boar taint than we are. And whilst the Chinese claim to not accept Improvac, there is definitely Improvac product that is entering their market. So we need to really be aware of the fact that everything that we produce, it's not just being produced for the UK consumer. We are part of a global market, and we need to be aware that the consumer may be more susceptible to boar taint than we are, and that we need to look at where everything goes within our supply chain. So control of boar taint, genetic selection. Well, androstenone, depending on the literature, is fairly to middling heritable, and scatol slightly less so. There's very strong correlation between the two. Now, JSR have done work on it, PIC have done work on it, Topics Norseman. There are plenty of companies that have looked at the levels of boar taint and how it can be affected through genetics. Unfortunately, quite a lot of the markers that affect boar taint also affect production efficiency. So that's going to be negative to the producer, and obviously we don't want that. Now all we're doing is waiting for technology to get to the point where we can use marker-assisted selection, and we might be able to hopefully reduce boar taint through genetic improvement, but we don't want to be causing any negative effects with regards to production efficiency. You know, we've spoken a lot over the last day about sustainability and everything else. The last thing we want is to produce a less sustainable product due to various things that we make decision-wise. So technology and long-term strategies. Well, Kealey's going to talk to you more detail about some of the work that we're working on for the biosensor. But now, 5 years, there's plenty of research out there looking at feed, ventilation systems, housing. We're not suggesting anything new, but if you are looking at investment in buildings, consider the fact that we are going to be more and more involved in the global market, independent of Brexit. And when you put your building up, have you actually taken into account the fact that you might want to consider boar taint reduction? Improvac is available on the market now, okay, Red Tractor, we can get a derogation. There are a few things that need to be negotiated, but there are tools out there already that we can use that will reduce boar taint. Biosensor human nose score feedback. So the Europeans, abattoirs, they're using the human nose score. They're looking at boar taint pigs on the slaughter line. Obviously, it's already past farm gate, so it's less of an issue, but it's basically making sure that if you have a boar-tainted boar, it is not going into a fresh pork product or a further processed pork product. What they're doing is identifying animals that have boar taint and either dumping them on markets that are more accepting, or they're making sure that they're diluted. So they're putting a certain percentage of boar-tainted meat and then adding gilt meat on top of that to dilute the effects. So it would be going into a further processed product. So, there's things that can be done within our processes at present. It may cause carcass imbalance and utilisation issues, but there's certainly things that we can be discussing with our supply chains with regards to utilisation of boar meat. Genetic Topics Norseman produced the Nada boar, and there's plenty of work that's been independently done by Varnigan that looked at, and they showed that there was an automatic 40% reduction in boar taint incidence. So it can be done very, very quickly just on the first generation of genetics. Long term, so you're looking at your housing, production systems, building design and management. Obviously, there's an awful lot of investment that needs to be done within the pig industry anyway going forwards. So that's not going to be a small thing, especially not when you've got to go through planning permission. But 10 years in line, we might be able to look at more building design and management. And we need to continually invest within those systems. And 15 years, okay, I just said we've got a 40% reduction in one generation, but that's only to a point. We need to really work on the genetics and continuously, and plenty of people are continuously reducing the level of boar taint that we are getting within our progeny. So summary of outcomes. Incidence of boar taint is independent of carcass weight. Boar taint incidence is higher in some imported meats due to dumping on the UK market. Tools available to reduce boar taint are available now. It's literally just getting all your ducks in a row and getting the whole supply chain to talk to each other. Investment in housing and production system management. So yet again, it's just communication within the supply chain, speaking to people.